Before we begin, Louis, thank you so much for your story. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's funny that you shared at the beginning that you felt like your story was all out of place, because I feel like I'm a little all over the place in Samuel tonight, so we're going to try to bring it together. I think one of the coolest things about God, though, is when we feel like everything's out of place, He just puts everything into place, so praise Him for that. I did start off here as an acting major years ago, 2013. Feels like yesterday. Definitely not. And I was an acting major for a whole semester. I absolutely loved acting. I was a part of my theater program in high school. My theater program was top 5 across the nation. It was not a performance high school. We just had an astounding group of directors and performers. It felt really good to come here and be accepted to the BFA acting program. But then I quickly figured out that acting wasn't actually what I wanted to do with my life. But for a time being, for a split moment, I really felt like acting was my path of promise, which is what I'm going to be speaking on tonight, this concept of the path of promise. And of course, over time, things change. I changed my major to secondary education and history, which is what I ended up graduating with. I ended up giving my life to Christ a year and a half after I came to UWSP, which drastically changed my journey. But I'm very, very excited to talk a little bit about what this path of promise is tonight. Before I begin, just a reality check, Anybody here had a long week? Go ahead and raise your hand. Been a long week? It's been a long week, let me tell you. There's been a lot of things going on, a lot of details everywhere, things scattering my brain, so I'm going to try to be as quick and concise as I can be tonight, but I'm not promising anything. So, without further ado, here we go. So, recently, crew, we've been going through a series where we've been talking about the life of David. For those of you who don't know who David is the son of a farmer named Jesse, and he would go on to become one of the most renowned kings of Israel, the second king of Israel, which is the ancient nation of God. So we've been following his life in 1 Samuel. We're going to be continuing with that today. But if you've missed our first couple talks between Courtney 2 weeks ago and Ryan last week, let me catch you up really quickly. So David is this farmer boy, and he is put before Samuel, this prophet of God. He is the youngest of his family, which is kind of seen as low back in those times. And Samuel anoints him as going to be the king of Israel. And at this time, Saul is still king, and David is still a shepherd, but eventually he goes to visit his brothers during this battle going on with the Philistines, which is another kingdom, and this man named Goliath is out there denying God, kind of flaming the Israel and the nation, and David decides to go into battle with this Philistine, with this particular man. And David, shocking to us, denies a sword, a shield, armor, all this stuff that would have equipped him for battle, and instead he decides to go into battle with a slingshot against this man who was trained his entire life for war. But through the grace of God, and God working through David, he takes him down, because once again, David has become God's anointed. So here we are on David's path of promise. And tonight I have 3 points about the path of promise that I want to highlight. Okay, 3 points. Number 1, following the path does not mean everything goes right. Following the path doesn't mean everything goes right. Number 2, which is kind of a sub-point, but there will be obstacles on this path, and some of those obstacles you didn't expect. I think even the worst obstacles that come up in our lives are the ones we didn't expect. Because as much as we like to plan and we like to expect things, sometimes things just go wrong and we don't expect them, or things get in the way. And number 3, you will need people to walk beside you as you walk this path. You're going to need people to walk beside you. So before I talk about what a path of promise is, let me just pray for us. Lord Jesus, I thank you that you are always with us in the midst of our storms. And in the midst of chaotic weeks like this one, Lord, I'm thankful that you hold all the details together, Lord. That I can lift my hands, palms open, and trust that you are in control. So as I come before you tonight and speak to this audience tonight, Lord, I know that I'm bringing nothing to the table. Lord, that you have a message you want to convey tonight, Lord. So I just pray that you would bless my tongue. Help me speak true the message you want to convey. Lord, if I speak anything that's not of you, just let it fall on deaf ears, Lord. But I pray that you use this message in the lives of these students tonight to move them and to produce fruit in their lives. We pray this in your name. Amen. So first of all, what is the path of promise? Okay, here's how I'm defining the path of promise tonight, okay? The path of promise is simply a life that is fully surrendered to and follows the Lord. Okay, the path of promise is simply a life that is fully surrendered to and follows the Lord. If you're living that out, you are on the path of promise. I promise you. It might look ugly right now. You might not be where you want to be, but I promise you, if you're doing that, you are on the path of promise. If you're not a Christian in the audience tonight, first of all, special welcome to you. Thank you so much for coming out. If you were not a Christian, I want you to think about this every time I use the path of promise. I want you to think about any goals or aspirations or your dream job that you want, something that you really desire in the future, and I want you to think about that as your path of promise tonight, because I guarantee you, no matter whether God's path of promise or your own goals and aspirations, these three things are going to be true. They're going to be true. It's just life. It's just life. So here we go. Number one, following the path does not mean that everything goes right. I've had the privilege of talking with many different people who have many different beliefs over the past few years, and there just seems to be this stigma that if you're following God, or if you're doing what you're meant to do, you're on the path for your dream job, or the dream wife or husband, or whatever it might be, that you're just going to love every minute of it, and it's going to come easy. For whatever reason, this stigma just exists in our culture. We expect the perfect relationship to always make us happy. We expect the perfect job to always make us happy. We expect the perfect boss. All these things that we just desire perfection from. We want it all to go right all the time. And the most ironic part is we're the ones who decide when things go wrong from our very subjective perspectives, okay? So when I wake up in the morning, I set an alarm clock. If I were to wake up 5 minutes before my alarm clock as someone who really loves sleep, I will have told you that that morning went wrong, all right? That's very subjective, and that's totally not true. It does nothing to the day. It just wasn't perfect, and that's okay. So it's not going to be easy. You might not love every minute of it, and that's okay, because loving every minute of everything and having your dream job and loving everything about that job, that's just not always going to be true, and that's okay. Okay? Another stigma we have in our current culture is if we have to work hard for something, or if we have to struggle for something, then that must not have been for us. If we have to struggle for something, that must not be for us. That also is not true. Some things in life you're going to have to struggle for. You're going to have to try hard for. It's going to get difficult. But I promise you, if it is getting difficult, if you are struggling and you are on the path of promise, you will eventually come out on top. I promise you that. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So let's take a look at David's life here. He's been chosen next king, defeated Goliath. Success is following him everywhere he goes. Chapter 18, verse 12. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had departed from Saul. So Saul is the king before David. The Lord had already departed from Saul, and he's starting to fear David. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men. And David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success, because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he led them in their campaigns. Now I know, just like 1 minute ago, I told you that the path of promise wasn't going to be easy and everything isn't going to go right. And at this point, you might be looking at the verses I have up and be like, wait a second, everything's going right for David. Success is following him wherever he goes. But let's fast forward 3 chapters really fast. Okay, I told you I was going to be everywhere tonight. Buckle up. Okay, chapter 20, verse 1. It says, Then David fled from Noth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, What have I done and what is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me? So what happened? What happened in those 3 chapters? I mean, David's being successful, everything's going right for him, and then all of a sudden, this man, this king who had taken him under his wing, is trying to kill him. Things are going wrong. In fact, Saul tries killing David on 2 separate occasions. He throws spears at David and tries to pin him to the wall, but David evades them each time. He even hopes his own daughter will be a snare to David in marriage, which I'll cover a little bit later. So what do you think is going through David's head at this time? Maybe questions of why this is happening. Maybe some of you have been there where things are happening in life where you're questioning, why is this happening? I imagine, Louis, when your brother got diagnosed with cancer, that question had been going through your brain. I imagine some of you have had experiences already in your life where you've questioned why things have happened around you the way they did. He's supposed to be the next king, but yet here we see him almost running from Saul and trying to evade being killed by this king who has almost unlimited power. So why is this happening? In David's eyes, this is all wrong. In fact, in chapter 19, which is the chapter right before those verses, David actually flees back to Samuel and he tells him everything. He tells him everything. Verse 18, when David had fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. Can you imagine that conversation? Hey Samuel, I know you anointed me king over Israel, but here we are. This king's trying to kill me. I really have no escape. He has unlimited power. What do you expect me to do? Should I go back to him? Should I flee? Should I just drop the whole Lord's anointed thing and not worry about that and chase something different? I can only imagine that conversation that happened between Samuel and David. Which leads me to my second point. There's going to be obstacles that you just don't expect in your life on the path of promise. There's going to be obstacles that you didn't expect. Some things you can predict, other things you just can't. As someone who was having success as part of Saul's army and winning him many victories, you would think that Saul would love David and would embrace him as he did before. He brought him in under his wing. He wants to make him his son-in-law in these 3 chapters. So why is Saul trying to kill David again and again and again? Chapter 18 again, verse 20. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, was in love with David, and when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. I will give her to him, he thought, so that she may be a snare to him, and so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So here's Saul's trying to use some trickery. He's trying to use his own daughter as leverage against David, continuing on. So Saul said to David, now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law, because he'd already tried to give David his first daughter. So then Saul ordered his attendants, speak to David privately and say, look, the king likes you and his attendants all love you. Now become his son-in-law. They repeated these words to David, but David said, do you think it is a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known. When Saul's servants told him what David had said, Saul replied, say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies. Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. Now I know not many of us have been to battle or war here, but can you imagine stopping in the middle of a battle and cutting off a specific part of another's body and just stopping everything and trying to collect just that? It's not a very easy thing to do. So Saul fully expected David to die. But here we are, verse 26. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So before the allotted time elapsed, David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. They counted out the full number of the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemies the rest of his days. In the same way as Saul is using trickery and he's trying to get David killed in battle by promising him his daughter, or he's trying to use his daughter to ensnare David against him with the Philistines, there are going to be things in your life that you just don't see coming that are going to be obstacles to you. When I started following God, I didn't think that my number one supporters, my family, would become my number one opposers, but they did. I've lost friends along the path of promise that I thought I would still be friends with. A job I thought I would love became difficult when my cooperating teacher was oppressive instead of assisting. Sorry, education majors. I pray that your experience is different. The path of promise is hard. It just is. It's hard. Okay, which leads me to number 3. You're going to need people to walk beside you on the path of promise. And for Saul, this is Jonathan. Jonathan is Saul's son. He is supposed to be the next king of Israel. It is his birthright. Okay? But here we have, in chapter 18, verse 1, After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off his robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Now it's one thing to give as the king's son your stuff, your tunic, your cloak, your weapons to another man. But it is a completely another thing to give what Jonathan gave. Because in that moment, John gave over a lot more than just his stuff. Jonathan gave David something that Saul does not give to David. Jonathan gave David his love. He stands in the gap and he truly loves David, the man who's going to become king over him, the man who is about to take his birthright. He loves David. It says he loved him as himself. Now, I don't know about you, but it is really hard to love someone as much as you love yourself. It just is. It's really difficult. As much as I really want to love people well, and I want to care for them well, sometimes when it comes down to me or them, I choose me. Why? Because I'm a broken human being. And I have a broken and distorted view of love, and I'm not good at loving people. I'm not naturally good at that. That is the grace of God working through my life. Okay? So Jonathan loved David as himself. It's hard to surrender your plans for someone else's. It's hard to lay down your birthright and give it to somebody else. Yet Jonathan does it. Not only does he give David his love, but he becomes a mediator for David in this struggle where Saul is trying to kill David. Let's take a look at chapter 19 now, verse 1. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David, but Jonathan had taken a great liking to David and warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out." Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to your servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason?" Saul listened to Jonathan and took his oath, "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." That's what Saul says. But of course, Saul ends up relenting on that oath as David's success continues. We pick up in chapter 20, verse 4. Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do that for you." Have you ever said this to anybody in your life? Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it for you. That's a challenging statement. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it for you. Continuing on, verse 5. So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I'm supposed to dine with the king, but let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him that David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, 'Very well,' then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me." So Jonathan and David hatch this plan together. David's going to hide, Jonathan's going to go to the king, and Jonathan, even to make sure that there are no, this plan is airtight, he tells David a plan. He says, "Okay, I'm going to come back to the field with the servant boy, and I'm going to shoot arrows. And if I tell the boy that the arrows are beyond him, that means you need to flee. You need to run, you need to get out of here. If I shoot the arrows to the side and tell the servant boy that they're to the side, that means you're safe and you're good." So we move on to the festival. Verse 24. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, "Why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, "Let me go, because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers. That is why he has not come to the king's table." Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die." Now at this moment, okay, David's on the path of promise. He has his friend Jonathan who's trying to mediate for him. Doesn't work. Saul wants to kill him. Okay? You might think this is an easy, no-brainer decision, but in all honesty, all the power is in Jonathan's hands at this moment. It's not Saul's. It's not David's. All the power is in Jonathan's hands, because Jonathan has the trust of David. He can kill him himself if he wanted to. He knows exactly where David is hiding. He can hand him over to Saul. And if that was your birthright, if that was in between you and glory, what would you have done? This is a crown we're talking about in the old days. But Jonathan chooses to shoot the arrows beyond the target and has one last parting conversation with David. David's not remotely safe at this point. David is on the steps of death. Anything goes wrong, David's dead. But Jonathan shoots the arrows. Verse 42, Jonathan says to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" Then David left, and Jonathan went back into town. If you have time or enjoy reading the Bible at all, I want to encourage you after tonight to go back and read 1 Samuel 18 through 20 in order. I know I'm skipping around a lot. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Okay? So what about this path of promise? If you need people to walk the path of promise with, okay, if you need people to continually point you in the right direction, to encourage you, who are those friends in your life that you can count on? I've lived long enough, and I'm not that old, trust me, but I've lived long enough to know that some friends are going to be my lifelong friends, and some friends are just going to be in my life for a season. As much as I'd love to keep in contact with everybody, your life is going to move on. You might get married, you might have children, you might have a full-time job, you might have a job that works weird hours. Okay? The people that you know right now might not be the same friends, the same people who are pointing you in the path of promise. But you need people at all times, okay? Some friends might be your lifelong friends. Some friends that you're eating at DeBow with right now might be your lifelong friends. But some friends might not be, and that's okay. Some people may only be in your life for a season. There are friends I had 3 years ago that I absolutely love. I've been to weddings for them, and I've talked to them since maybe once or twice, but it's not a regular contact. That doesn't mean I don't love them. They're just not the friends currently encouraging me and pointing me to the path of promise. Okay, who are your people that are with you that can continually point to the path of promise? How can you continually sustain through your life people who can continually point you to the path of promise? Okay? Things change. But no matter what stage of life you're in, I promise you, you're going to need people alongside you. You're going to need people who will bear your burdens and won't drop you as soon as things become difficult. You're going to need people who can look you in the eye and tell you the truth. But those same people who can look you in the eye and give you a hug when you need it, you're going to need them. Okay? Now, I want to share a little bit about my path of promise as I've been living on my path of promise, because my path of promise hasn't always been pretty either. It's been actually pretty ugly for a little bit of time in 2019. Kevin, do you want to throw up those photos? This is my path of promise. Oh, that is a blurry photo on the left. Shoot. It's my grandparents and 4 pixel. So this summer I was support raising for my second year of interning with Crew, And my grandfather unexpectedly passed away. We were celebrating 4th of July with him. Everything seemed good. Literally 2 hours later, he had a terrible fall, led to his death a week later. What are you going to do? What to be expected? On the day of my grandfather's funeral, an apartment shown on the right that I had just moved into 2 weeks prior, hit with a lightning bolt. Fire burned the structure. Landlord calls me, you need to move out. You can't live here anymore. Okay. All right, well, I have 2 weeks left of my other lease, so 2 weeks to find a new apartment now, something we've been searching for. So I get back to Point, and I don't know, how many of you are from Point? Okay, from Point people, or maybe central Wisconsin people, I don't remember how big it was. The weekend I came back from that funeral to handle all this stuff was the weekend the flash flood came through. Well, you know what happened, okay? Trees knocked down, power lines out, no power for 3 days, and because of different circumstances that were happening in my life, no internet for 2 weeks. So how am I going to find an apartment now? How am I going to deal with all this emotional stuff hitting me all at the same time? Ellen, I know I'm over time, but I promise you I'm finishing up. Okay? How am I going to deal with all this? What's going on? Why is all this happening all at the same time? I'm trying to support Raise Lord. I gave you my life. I said I'm going to do this for another year, and all of a sudden all these rocks and stones are hitting me. What is going on? Why is this going on? And I can tell you that at points in the summer and at points in fall semester, I made wrong decisions. I was very emotionally stretched, and I didn't give myself enough space, and I was hard on myself, and I didn't give grace to myself, which is why I really want to emphasize point 3, because in that moment where I wasn't giving grace to myself, I had some stinking good friends who came alongside me and said, look, you are still on the path. You're still following Christ. You're still going for what you believe the Lord has for you. Okay, you're really going to need those friends. So I have this example up here of what Jonathan was. So King Saul, essentially what he did in his jealousy was he put up a wall between himself and David. He cast him out. He said, you're dead. Nothing's going to change that. You are dead. But Jonathan, being the friend that he is, steps in for King Saul. Okay? He steps in for David. And he mediates with King Saul. He tries to figure things out. This is the beauty of the gospel. Kevin, switch diagrams. Okay? When we sin, when Adam and Eve ate that apple a long time ago and brought sin into the world, a wall was set between us and God. Spiritually separated. When you die, you're gone. Nothing for us to do. But Jesus came. Jesus was sent down by God. And Jesus became our mediator. Jesus became our way to salvation. Our path to promise. So if you're here tonight and you've never heard of this idea of the path of promise before, if you don't know God in your life, if you don't know who Jesus is, and you want to know things about Him, I promise you, there's a way. There's a thing on your door prize card beneath your seat says, how can I know God personally? My friends and I would love to meet up with you and explain more about what Jesus did for us. But I promise you, friends, if you're following Christ, okay, it's not always going to be pretty. There's going to be things that happen along the way, things that you don't expect. But as long as you have people beside you, and you're truly trying to follow the Lord, you're going for your goals, you are on the path of promise. Let me pray for us. Lord, I just thank you so much for the cross. Lord, that you didn't just leave us cast out. That in the figure of Jonathan, Lord, you sent your son Jesus from the line of David to be our great mediator, to be the one who could restore our relationship with you, Lord. I thank you for that opportunity, Lord, that's presented before all of us, because our life is quick, Lord, and it's unexpected. We never know when things are going to happen. I know things in my life that I didn't expect. I know there are students out there who had painful things happen in their early lives, where sickness struck their family, and they weren't ready, Lord. They weren't expecting it. But Lord, you provided a way past that. Lord, a spiritual reconnection with you in which we could experience eternal life. So I just pray for each of these students tonight as they debate the path of promise, as they think about the path of promise, Lord, that they would put their trust in you and move closer towards you as they reach out to them. I pray this in your name. Amen.